We have a new tropical storm in the Caribbean, and it is forecast to strike the west coast of Florida as a major hurricane next week. Good evening, I'm Mike Nasa with this Friday night update about 11 p.m. Eastern Time, at the time of this recording, because it is a pretty serious situation for Florida, and we're going to talk about that. We also have Fiona at the top of the screen, which has transitioned from a Category 4 hurricane into a 933 millibar post-tropical cyclone, as it's totally losing its tropical characteristics, but is a storm to be reckoned with for the Canadian Maritimes up there. We also have Gaston still affecting the Azores and a new tropical storm off Africa. A lot to cover. Here's the latest, closest to home, Tropical Storm Ian. This is going to get top billing from now on. As of 11 p.m. Eastern, Ian was at 14.8 north, 72.0 west, winds of 40 miles per hour, so it's a minimal tropical storm moving west-northwest at 12. And we do have a tropical storm watch for Jamaica and a hurricane watch for the Cayman Islands, with the expectation that by Sunday night, early Monday, Ian should become a Category 1 hurricane, and then by Monday night into Tuesday, strengthen a little more quickly as it crosses western Cuba over the very narrow stretch of western Cuba, and then become a major hurricane, a Category 3, maybe stronger, over the southeast Gulf of Mexico, just off of the Dry Tortugas, and then make landfall somewhere along the west coast of Florida. And again, it could be anywhere from Apalachicola all the way down to areas there of the Upper Keys. Most likely right now, areas of Tampa, Sarasota, Venice, down there near Charlotte Harbor and Marco Island, this stretch right here. And again, we could have a very serious problem on our hands with this storm. Here's the satellite loop, and it doesn't look all that impressive. We've got kind of a spin down here, but the center is further north. It's still getting sheared a little bit here from the northeast. I'll show you that in a second. But as Fiona lifts out, this high pressure is going to steer it, and it's going to round that high, and the environment should become much more favorable over the very hot waters here of the Northwest Caribbean, and that's why we're expecting it to be a Category 1, 2, and then a 3 hurricane by the time it gets to Florida. Here's the track models, and they seem in pretty good agreement at a west-northwest track here, and then a turn to the northwest, especially as it intensifies. It's going to move over a very flat part of Cuba. In 2004, Hurricane Charlie moved over that part, and it weakened from about 115 to 110, and then it came right back. So we are not expecting a lot of weakening. If anything, it may be strengthening as it moves across western Cuba, and then a lot more strengthening over the southeast Gulf. How much strengthening? Well, right now the intensity models are anywhere between a Category 2 and a Category 4. So you want to aim for a 3. That's what the Hurricane Center is saying. But they do stress it could rapidly intensify, like we saw with Hurricane Charlie over the southeast Gulf, in which case you might be dealing with a Category 4 hurricane. So again, you want to be prepared for one just in case it strengthens faster than we're thinking. Now, here's the GFS model, and I wanted to show this because this is the 18Z, but watch what it does with the hurricane. It brings Ian up as a strong hurricane, a Category 4 right here in the Gulf of Mexico. Very, very dangerous. This would be on Tuesday. And then watch what happens. It moves very slowly, weakening Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, finally comes ashore on Friday as a much greatly weakened hurricane near the Big Bend area of Florida near Apalachicola. That's the GFS model. The European model takes it as a much stronger hurricane, a violent hurricane, making landfall over Sanibel Island, and that would be on Wednesday. Now, there is a big difference between Friday and Wednesday, because if the hurricane does what the GFS is saying and moves out and kind of takes its time, la-di-da, it's going to weaken, possibly dramatically, before sloshing ashore up here. However, if it doesn't slow down and it hits on Wednesday, it's inland much faster as a stronger hurricane with less time to be over northern Gulf cooler waters and suck in any dry air. So Sanibel would deal with a much more violent hurricane than Apalachicola. Not to say it wouldn't be a strong hurricane, but the European model here is much more what the Hurricane Center seems to be thinking with their track bringing it inland by the time, say, Wednesday rolls around. Wind shear, this isn't going to be a problem much longer, is headed into an area of very favorable low wind shear. Wind shear should not be something to rip this storm apart. And looking at that map, here you can see there's a little anticyclone here, and that clockwise flow there is kind of giving it a little bit of easterly shear, and that's why it's kind of disheveled. However, it will soon let up, and over these very hot waters, we will see intensification. Fiona, I wanted to mention Tropical Cyclone Fiona, post-tropical cyclone now, 44.5 north, 60.8 west, winds 105, moving north at 46 miles per hour. Remember 2 days ago this thing was moving at 8 miles an hour? 46. It is no longer a tropical cyclone, but these winds are impacting Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and the Canadian Maritimes here. Quebec, you're getting in on the action. We still have those hurricane warnings up as hurricane force winds are going to impact the area. Look at the naked center. Look at how it transitioned from a Category 4 hurricane to not even a hurricane anymore. Now just a big North Atlantic ferocious storm. All that energy is pushing into areas there. A lot of heavy rain. Halifax, Nova Scotia, Liverpool, Sherbrooke. You guys are getting in on some of it. Right now, it's kind of strange because some areas are reporting that they're not having a lot of wind and rain, but other areas are getting pummeled. This is going to be an interesting storm. We could have a lot of winds on the backside of it as it pools here to the north very quickly. Gaston, a tropical storm, 38.9 north, 29.5 west, winds of 60, moving southwest at 8. This thing's going to move west now and spit out, and some of the long-range models kind of show it getting further west. I don't think it's going to end up in the Bahamas or anything, but it'll be interesting to see if Gaston survives to kind of loop back around further to the west. Nevertheless, right now we have the tropical storm warnings over the Azores because it's been affecting them, and you look at that satellite imagery, there's the thunderstorm activity just getting sheared apart. So even though it's 60 miles an hour, this is the center right here, and the thunderstorms are off over the Azores, and that's creating gusty winds and heavy rainfall. We have a new tropical storm off Africa, Hermine. This thing became a tropical storm at 5 p.m. The one in the Caribbean became a tropical storm at 11 p.m. And so this stole the name Hermine, and it looks like Ian is going to be a memorable hurricane. So that could have been Hurricane Hermine. So it was really a race for names. But this system off Africa looked too good to not be a tropical storm. It's at 19.4 north, 20.8 west, winds of 40, moving north at 10. Not expected to do much. It should just meander out here and not do anything. But looking at that satellite, some impressive convection there, way off there towards the African coastline, with more waves here moving on out, and our invest, if it still is even an invest, out here in the central Atlantic. So we still have hurricane season to go, but right now the main focus has to be on our storms, and again, that's our tropical storm Ian, which is now going to take center stage as it organizes, becomes a hurricane, and then a strong hurricane taking aim at Florida. Fiona is going to be out of here. We're not going to talk about it anymore. It was a memorable hurricane. Hit Puerto Rico, the Dominican, the Turks and Caicos, Bermuda, and now Canadian Maritimes. That name might be retired because of the damage that it did in the Caribbean, to say nothing of what it might do up here in the Canadian Maritimes. And Hermine, there's Hermine moving on off Africa with Gaston. A lot of activity in the tropics, but as I mentioned before, the main focus will become Tropical Storm Ian, forecast to become a major hurricane near Florida. So tomorrow, Saturday, I want you guys in Florida, to say nothing of the Cayman Islands and all that in western Cuba. I want you guys to be on alert. I want you to start to think about your hurricane kit, bottled water, flashlights, batteries. Make sure all your prescriptions are filled. Make sure your car's gassed up. You got money out of the bank. ATMs won't work if the power goes out. So be ready, because we could have a very, very serious strike on Florida. I'm Mike Naso with this late Friday night update. I'll be back as time goes by with more on the tropics and all of our storms, batten down the hatches in the Canadian Maritimes for Fiona. And I'll have more later on.